Catherine Lorre was the only daughter of actor Peter Lorre and his wife Anne Marie Brenning. While she isn't well known, her father Peter Lorre was easily one of cinema's greatest actors. He was a noted character actor who appeared in great films including M, Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon, and Casino Royale. His marriage to Anne Marie Brenning had its troubles. Young Catherine Lorre was born in 1953, a few months after her parents' marriage. Sadly, her childhood was tumultuous as a result of their failing marriage. If that didn't seem stressful enough, she probably didn't expect that in 1977 she'd get abducted. Within a few years of their marriage, Peter Lorre and Anne Marie Brenning were having issues. They eventually divorced in 1962 when their daughter was 9. 2 years later, Peter Lorre died from a stroke. Anne Marie later died in 1971 due to complications from alcoholism. It's difficult for any child to deal with warring parents. To lose both your parents at such a young age is traumatic, to say the least. To make matters worse, no one seemed willing to care for Catherine after both her parents passed away. Eventually, Celia Lovsky, Peter's first wife, intervened. She offered film critic James Powers to move into the upstairs area of her home. The one condition was he had to adopt Catherine. He agreed and cared for Catherine. She spent her time with James Powers and Celia Lovsky and served as a connection to the Lorre family. Life seemed a bit more stable, but it wasn't perfect. Then, one day in 1977, she experienced perhaps the most traumatic experience of her life. Before we tell you about Catherine Lorre and the Hillside Gang, please like this video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. One night in 1977, Catherine was approached by two strange men. They were Angelo Buono Jr. and Kenneth A. Bianchi. These two cousins had devious intentions. Kenneth had moved to LA to live with Angelo. The two young men had an unhealthy obsession for women and decided no one would miss young women if they suddenly disappeared. They eventually began to abduct, rape, and murder women. Between October 1977 and February 1978, a total of 10 young women were victims to what the media dubbed as the Hillside Gang or the Hillside Strangler. The disappearance of these young women caused widespread panic, though no one could surmise who the culprit or culprits were. One day, Angelo and Kenneth managed to come across a young lady wandering on her own. They abducted her and intended to do the same with her as they had with their other victims. The 25-year-old woman revealed she was Catherine Lorre, daughter of late actor Peter Lorre. This stopped the men in their tracks. The cousins were huge cinema buffs and loved Peter Lorre's work. Her life was spared because of her father. She didn't make too many public statements regarding her abductors, that is, until she realized they were the notorious Hillside Gang. During a period of 4 months, the cousins kidnapped women and took them to Buono's home. They would rape them, murder them, and then wash the bodies clear of evidence. They would then dump the bodies in various locations around LA. Most of the time, the bodies were dumped on hillsides. Eventually, Kenneth left LA to move to Washington State. Though he was now on his own, he still couldn't control his wicked urges. He murdered 2 college students, and this would lead to him getting caught. There were witness statements connecting these 2 college students to Kenneth Bianchi. The police also found similarities with these 2 murders and the 10 murders committed by the Hillside Gang. Eventually, Kenneth confessed to all the murders and revealed that Angelo was his accomplice. Both men received life in prison for their crimes. Kenneth Bianchi is still serving his prison sentence, while Angelo Buono died in prison of a heart attack in 2002. When their names and photographs were published in the newspaper, Catherine Lorre realized she had been lucky to escape the notorious Hillside Gang. As far as we know, she was the only survivor. She stated the reason she was spared was because the men were fans of her father. She even said she didn't feel threatened and she felt the encounter was friendly. So what happened to Catherine following her run-in with the Hillside Gang? In 1980, she got married and had a happy life with her husband. Sadly, he passed away a few years after their marriage from a motorcycle accident. Following this tragedy, Catherine's diabetes, which she acquired as a child, became even worse. Her health began deteriorating rapidly, and she was eventually hospitalized at Harbor General. During this time, she had been suffering not only from diabetes, but also from circulation problems and vision problems. She spent about a year at the hospital before dying of complications from diabetes, as well as sepsis and encephalomalacia. She was 32 years old. Her funeral happened after a month of being held in the morgue. Her funeral had a low turnout consisting of her cousin, her father's lawyer and son, and her nurse. Her life clearly wasn't the easiest, and it seemed she never got a break. But how did her life become like this? How did it become so tumultuous? One has to look at the tumultuous life her father lived. Peter Lorre was born as Laszlo Lowenstein in 1904. He was born in Austria-Hungary, now in modern-day Slovakia. He didn't have the easiest childhood either, losing his mother when he was 4. He began his acting career at age 17 and moved to Berlin to act in stage plays. He became a major film star when he appeared as a child killer in Fritz Lang's film M. Though this was a cruel and villainous role, his performance was lauded, and M is considered to be one of the greatest films ever made. Unfortunately, this character was also held against Peter Lorre. When the Nazis came into power, the character of the child killer was depicted by them as being typical of Jews. Joseph Goebbels was known to be a fan of Peter Lorre, but as a Jew, Goebbels warned Peter he had to leave Europe, else his fate would be the same of the other Jews who remained. Peter Lorre escaped to France and eventually settled in England. It was here that he began his English-language career. He appeared in The Man Who Knew Too Much, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. This made him a star in the English-speaking world, even though he was barely fluent at the time. He eventually settled in the U.S. and became a Hollywood star. He appeared in the Mr. Moto films, Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon, Arsenic and Old Lace, and Casino Royale, the first TV adaptation of a James Bond story. While his career was going well, the tragedies of his own life must have taken its toll. He had various health problems as a result of his weight gain. He even had a habit of taking drugs and drinking. He was part of the Holmby Hills Rat Pack, which was an informal drinking club that included many other major stars. He was married 3 times, with Catherine being his only child. He was in many ways the perfect actor. He could set aside the tragedies of his own life to entertain us through his characters. He died in 1964. His friend, actor Vincent Price, read the eulogy at his funeral. One wonders what Peter's life would have been like if it wasn't riddled with tragedy. One also imagines his daughter might not have had to deal with such tragedies had her family life been more stable. If there's one lesson we can learn from the life of Peter Lorre is that even major stars have their troubles just like the rest of us. When we remember Peter, let's also remember the struggles he and many of his generation had to face. And when we remember Catherine Lorre, let's also think about how important it is for a child to have a stable family life. So now it's time to hear from you. What do you think about Catherine Lorre's story? How does her life story make you think about your own life? Does it make you more appreciative? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.